Hey, Love Your Life fam. It's Crystal and Andre Holland.
What's up, everybody?
Hey, looking forward to hearing from you. So to find us, you can check us out on
Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Stitcher. We look forward to hearing from you all.
Yeah, we came a long way, and that's what the songs say. And I can do all things. I can do all things. Yeah, I can do all things. Yeah,
hey, Love Your Life family. This is Crystal.
What's going on, fam? It's your boy Andre, and we're back at you.
Yes, we are with another discussion about loving your life. Man. How are you doing today, babe?
It has been on the heels of everything that is going on in the midst of America and even the world. These various protests, it has been very challenging, I say that, to truly be at peace. And I think that's a good thing because it's hard for me to believe anyone can turn a blind eye to the things that are going on in America. I think it directly affects us all. But to be honest, it's been a challenge. Obviously, we're enjoying summer, staying active in the midst of semi-quarantining. Economy's opening back up. Here in Arizona, we have a curfew at 8 p.m., 8 to 5 a.m. So obviously, dealing with the curfew, those hours, but just truly spending time with family, loving on one another, staying involved, completing activities and so forth, but also just dealing with the challenge of how to move forward. I mean, that's just the reality.
Yeah, I concur with you. I think about how we frequently talk about how it's good to be challenged and it forces us to grow up and to face some things, look some things in the face, and we are 100% being forced to do that as a nation, as a globe, to look some things in the face that that people have tried to conceal, as we've discussed in our previous podcast, that you cannot conceal hate, and so as painful as a lot of this has been, it's good that we're addressing it, and it goes back to what you and I frequently say. It's time to tell your story.
That's for sure, because the reality of it is, with these protests and riots and the protests, and due to the latest incident of another black man being killed by the police, George Floyd, again, it's time out for being silent. I'm going to stress we have to do our part individually. I want to implore all of our listeners, listen, hey, get involved, do your part. Your battle may not look like someone else's, but we all have a part to play to tackle systematic racism, to address these injustices with the goal of getting them corrected so that we can be a better people and a better country forward. That's just the reality. So for sure, I think, today, babe, I really want to talk about the importance of not being silent.
That's huge.
Yeah, that is so important. The importance of not being silent. All too often, it is easier to not speak up when something is wrong or when an injustice has occurred, or when you do something that misses the mark. It would be easy to try to turn a blind eye, say it didn't happen, ignore it. But I want to encourage us all. The importance of not being silent is so key. And for all of us, my brothers and sisters from all ethnicities that are protesting, we're protesting in our own right. Listen, it's important not to be silent. It would be easy to continually turn off the news and not say, hey, it's not happening, or try to ignore it. And I understand we all have a limit at times. It's been difficult for me to watch just a flood or rewinding over and over of the different deaths, just three to mention: Eric Gardner, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. I mean, it's hard to continue to watch those things. However, it's important that we never forget and that we use these to truly spark dialogue so that we can be a better people. So the importance of not being silent is key. It is time out for suffering in silence. It is time out for saying it's no big deal. It's time out for turning a blind eye. How we change things for the better is to speak up. We cannot be silent. And again, I want to encourage people, listen, we have to have meaningful dialogue with the goal of bringing corresponding action, not just talking to talk, coming together to strategize, to converse with the goal of meaningful changes to occur, so action. So the importance of not being silent, man, is key, babe.
Most definitely. And, just listening to you over the last couple of days as a Black woman, hearing my Black husband discuss some of the things that he's had to endure. And as we've had our own personal discussions and continue to talk, stuff that just life in general, you learn how to push it down and keep it moving. And our silence as a people, as a community, is a disease that has now surfaced to the point where it's just so cancerous that you have no other option but to go in and you have to treat this thing at the very root. And silence is dangerous. We think about in the natural realm when one of the most deadliest diseases, hypertension, but they refer to it as the silent killer because you don't realize the damage that it's causing because there are no symptoms. And when you don't talk about things, you silence the symptom. Mm-hmm. And so when you're able to sit and have a discussion, begin to talk about it, you're unraveling, you're ungrounding those issues, putting them in the light that it's forcing us as a people, as a community, as a nation, as a globe to now systematically uproot hate at its very core, and it's only going to happen one person at a time. And so I think taking a realistic look, again, I always go back to not setting unrealistic expectations, understanding that this thing is over 400 years old, right. That has, what's the word I want to use, arrested our nation, arrested souls and, our minds. And when you've been locked up for that long on both ends, however you contributed to it or did not contribute to it, it takes years to unravel that. And so for those of you that are on the front line and you have the organizations, I'm high-fiving you from here, and we're going to do our part. We are doing our part with the sphere of influence that God has given us.
Yeah. And I want to stress too, I definitely, again, I appreciate my brothers and sisters of all ethnicities. My white brothers has reached out, just said, hey, I'm with you. I'm definitely praying for you. Those that just called, how you doing? Just to talk. I really appreciate the open lines of communication. And I want to stress again, that goes with the importance of not being silent, because at the end of the day, it is easy to try to turn a blind eye, especially if you think it doesn't affect you. But when you're dealing with hate, such as what occurred to George Floyd with his life, where he was murdered at the hand of a police officer with a knee in the back of his neck for over 8 minutes, that type of hate and injustice affects us all. And I want to stress is, as we talk about the importance of not being silent, listen, a big key issue in all of this is the hypocrisy. And I'm just going to be real. And this is not everyone, but one of the things people hate, and a lot of people hate, especially African Americans. Again, I'm not trying to speak for all Black people, but one of the things that just burns to the core, you ask most people and they're going to tell you, no, I don't believe in violence and so forth. But it's frustrating when you hear your white brothers and sisters, and even some of your Black brothers and sisters, I don't understand why they're being so violent during the protest. They can speak up about the violence, some of the violence that some people, not all of the protesters, have caused, but they don't speak up about the violence coming from police brutality. They want to talk about violence during the protest, the buildings and so forth, but no mention of the violence that many Black people have faced at the hand of law enforcement. That is so frustrating. And we can't be silent about that. It's just one of the greatest forms of hypocrisy, and the reality of it, yes, I believe in peace. But when I'm constantly getting my head if I'm constantly getting beat upside the head and harassed, what I'm saying? The first thing you shouldn't be coming to me about peace. What about going to some of those officers or those systems that's oppressing me and talk to them about peace? And so, again, I'm not a proponent of an eye for eye or rioting and looting. I understand it's against the law, and I understand that, it's not a reflection of the protest at large. I don't agree with it, but I understand the frustration that comes along with it. And a big part of the frustration is because, you want to talk about peace or peaceful protests, but where is the peaceful protest against these systems that is hell-bent on killing black people at the hand of hate and racism? It's hypocrisy. Where is the peace that comes from trying to hide it under the rug? 2 months? 2 months, almost 2 months, month and a half went by in regards to, the charging of Ahmaud Arbery, mm-hmm. who was hunted down and killed. I think it was about like a month and a half. Why did it take so long for charges to be brought? And if it didn't hit social media and when people began to talk about it and publicize it, who knows how long it would have taken? But see, that again, that's the hypocrisy we're talking about. So don't talk to me about peace unless you're going to be confronting peace on all sides. At the end of the day, as humans, we all want to earn a living wage or have a business that provides, not a living wage. I mean, a wage that you can enjoy life. As humans, we all have that desire, that so-called American dream. Okay? It doesn't matter the color of our skin. But when you're systematically facing glass ceilings and obstacles to oppress you, and then the very criminal justice system that is supposed to protect all is one of the oppressors in many facets, that gets frustrating. And it does get people to the point where they want to act out in anger. Okay, I'm not justifying it, but I'm trying to get people to understand that the only way we solve this is to engage in meaningful dialogue versus being silent and think, okay, well, we're just going to give it a couple of months, it'll die down and it'll go away. No, that anger, that hate, it doesn't just go away. It lays dormant, or it just breeds and gets stronger and stronger and stronger to just like that teapot. It spills over. And so it's important to listen. We got to get this thing right, in how we vote and laws that are being passed and open discussions and dialogues, starting with our families, our community members, our brothers and sisters all across the aisle. We have got to engage in meaningful dialogue with the goal of corresponding action. It is very important to not be silent. We cannot afford to be silent on these issues.
With that said, also realizing that as a community, we have been conditioned to shut up.
Yeah.
We've been conditioned to protect other, environments and people and suffer in silence.
And that goes back to just the institutionalized, the institutional racism. I want you to think about it. And again, sometimes you start having conversations, you bring up slavery, people automatically tune out because they say it's 400 years ago or whatever. But I just want to get, hundreds of years ago. But I want to give you a scenario. I just want to give you just kind of a parallel where you kind of think about slavery. Well, you've been conditioned. You better not tell. You better shut your mouth, and you better sit there and take this beating and so forth. And you had to be quiet, and you couldn't talk about it.
You were made a public display. Okay.
If you tried to run or talk about it or complain, you were whipped, killed, lynched. It was a form of to keep you quiet, to keep your mouth shut. Well, here we are in 2020. Obviously slavery was abolished in the 1860s. Mm-hmm. Slavery was abolished. Here we are in the year 2020. And then there's an oppressive legislative system trying to keep us to our mouth shut. Don't speak up about it. Don't protest. And again, the frustration, people got upset when Colin Kaepernick took a knee.
In peace.
In peace. Silent protest. And now some of these same people have a problem with the protesting that's going on.
And called a thug for peacefully protesting.
Right. And so, again, don't talk to me about peace unless you're ready to talk about peace in all spheres for all people. Okay. And again, I want to stress this as an African American, as a black man who believes in Jesus Christ. without a shadow of a doubt. Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, and I'm going to profess that, and who is a man of faith. But I need to go here too. Don't try to hide behind Scripture. I mentioned this last week. Do not try to hide behind Scripture. Because, again, don't talk to me about your God when who you can't see, when you don't love your brother enough who you can see to speak up against the injustices that's going on against him. The hypocrisy. So if you want to talk about God, about everything else, but be silent on injustices against humanity, I'd rather not hear from you or your God, because that's hypocrisy.
And it's not a reflection of who God is.
Right. This is a human issue. A human issue. Not a God issue. This is a human issue. And so, again, these levels of hypocrisy and this issue of, why this and why that, listen, we have to get it out. And just like you tell someone when someone passes away, how dare you tell me how I need to grieve? How dare you tell me it doesn't take all that? How dare you try to put your thoughts on how I should grieve or how I should feel as a black man? Or the statute of limitations that should be gone out due to grief or whatever. Your thoughts of how I should feel or what I should do or what is right.
Or making more noise about a building burning versus the lives that have been burning for generations.
Right.
Burning and suffering. Right.
And I'm frustrated. Yeah. Like I said, I don't like to see the portion of people, and it's not a reflection of all the protests, but I don't like to see the portion of people that are setting fires and looting and so forth. But that's your focus. Where these same focus and cries have been when this has been going on, when innocent black people have been killed at the hand of police? Where's your focus been? Where's your comments about that? So if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it all, versus picking and choosing what to talk about. It's okay for you, but not okay for me. I mean, that's the type of thing that I'm talking about. We cannot afford to be still. And listen, again, God bless George Floyd, the latest victim of police brutality that we know of. And I could just go on and on, just the different names of people that have been killed and murdered. May their soul rest in peace. But I want to stress this, even before these latest deaths, as a black man, I've had to have these conversations with my children. Not just within the last 2 months, 6 months, or a year. Since the time they were like 5 and 6, I began to really talk to them about race and making sure they understand who they are, building them up, not so they won't feel inferior to anyone. Make sure that they understand that they are some people where they go, they're going to treat them different or maybe look at them different because of the color of their skin. I've had to have the conversation years ago with my 3 sons and now my daughter about how to interact with the police. Because of the reality of the world we live in. And so when I say we can't afford to be quiet, listen, we got to get this out. We cannot afford to be silent. We have to talk about this. That is the only way that change is going to occur. Talking about it with corresponding action. I mean, this is real. And at the end of the day, I would encourage every listener, wherever you are, whatever your sphere of influence, your metron, your career, listen, we can't afford to go back to business as usual and not address these issues.
It's not an option. It really isn't. If we sit and we think like still trying to manage the COVID-19, yeah. All of your escapes are still shut down. All of your sports, your golf and your baseball, all of that is shut down. And this is not going away, period. There is a momentum in the atmosphere, and it is going to continue to climb and climb because people are tired. And you have mothers and fathers waking up every day, and they are looking at their children. And they are going to do what they have to do to keep them alive or to keep themselves alive. And we're having this discussion in 2020.
Right. And that's why it's so important, because again, if you're silent about it and you think it doesn't affect you, okay, you're wrong. Because at the end of the day, as humans, we have more in common And an injustice against one is an injustice against us all. And if you can only speak up for injustices that you think are directly correlated with you versus being able to see unjust ways that other people are being victimized, okay, then how dare you put your mouth or your limitations on someone else because they don't agree with you. Listen, we have an opportunity, life in the midst of these protests, in the midst of George Floyd's death. We have an opportunity to do better. We have an opportunity to truly, as I stated before, look in the mirror, look within and say, listen, we have to do our part to right this wrong.
And, just being mindful also that using certain people that are out there trying to shed light on criminal background of certain individuals that have been killed by police officers, if they have gone to jail and if they have served their time, how dare you shame them publicly for the sentence that they paid for, went to jail, paid for the sins that they committed, the crimes that they committed, and then try to bring that up as a reason to not feel sorry for what happened to this individual.
And I'm just going to be honest. Listen, Candace Owens, look, I was just watching Facebook, and I have to monitor how much I'm on even social media, but just talked about his record and George Floyd's record and so forth. Just asinine. The issue is the unjust way. He was murdered by a police officer. The very people that we pay taxes to protect and serve, he was murdered, knee in the back of his neck over 8 minutes. And you have the nerve to say he's not a martyr or that he you bring up his background. How does that change the very fact that he was killed by an institution that is paid by us, the people, to protect and serve?
And if you're going to talk about it, let's talk about Apostle Paul. Okay? Murdered Christians.
And then wrote half of the Bible. Okay? So there's redemption. So, but again, it's just asinine comments that people are making. And I want to stress to our listeners that, don't get sidetracked by these distractions.
Proverbs 18:20, 18:2.
Do not get sidetracked by these distractions. One of the things that I really love in the midst of the protests is all the ethnicities.
It's beautiful.
I mean, it's a beautiful thing where people, white, brown, Asian, Hispanic, black people, all coming together, speaking up, saying this is wrong. I mean, that is the beauty. Because you when you see such a mass group of people united in this fight, that says that, listen, this is not right. And so when people like Candace Owen comes and drops stuff to try to be a distraction, look, see beyond those distractions and say, listen, you can be blind as a bat and see that what happened to George Floyd and many other African Americans at the hand of police is unjust and wrong. So don't be silent. I'm definitely one of the things that we talked about, obviously numb and so forth, but I really am one of the, out of all of this, the thing that continually gives me hope is just seeing the amount of people that have been, galvanized and that have been charged, coming together, standing together, protesting together. People of all faiths, all ethnicities coming together to say this is wrong. This is not okay. Not only in America, but even in other countries. I mean, so there's the beauty,
Germany,
the beauty of what is occurring right now.
All over
people
the
are coming
world.
together, opening up their mouths, speaking up against these injustices.
Largest protest in world history. The earth is crying out for healing.
Crying out for healing, crying out for justice. And it's not later, it's now. It's not later, it is now.
And I said real quick out there, I threw out there Proverbs 18:2. It says, fools care nothing for thoughtful discourse. All they do is run off at the mouth. So understand, you are going to be confronted by a fool. Don't waste your time. Get to the table with those that are ready to put their hand to the plow.
Yeah. And then I'm going to stress too, listen, because we want to make sure that we talk about dialogue and in discussion, there's always going to be things that people agree to disagree on. Okay? But have the discussions. Make yourself available to engage in dialogue and discourse. Because at the end of the day, when you do that, you're positioning yourself to learn as well as to help others learn, to give and receive. And so that's going to be key. For me, you know, one of the things I was getting frustrated earlier, babe, I'm just going to be real. I was getting frustrated earlier just thinking about, man, there's some people on social media I'm an unfriend. And, you know, just some of the comments were so, I felt really so racist. But for me, and again, I'm not telling you what you should do. I'm just giving you, for me, I said, you know what? I'm not going to unfriend anyone. I'm going to still keep promoting love, engaging in meaningful dialogue, because at the end of the day, I'll never know what seed I may be planting by still discussing or engaging in dialogue. And so for me, I'm not going to unfriend anyone. I don't plan on unfriending anyone. I mean, who knows what the future may hold? But I want to be able to engage in discussions. I want to be able to post. And as long as you're, you know, connected to me on social media platforms, hey, whether you like me or not, unless you delete me, you still going to get the comments that I have, because I just want to share a perspective that you may not be accustomed to. And again, we can all learn from one another. That's the beauty of coming together. There are always things that we can learn from one another, and it starts with having that meaningful discussion. So I would encourage, keep the dialogue along. Now, if you get to a point where, you know, someone's just being foolish, like just honestly, teammate of mine, college, Oregon State University, I'm sitting there looking at some of these posts and pictures and comments, and I'm, you know, not attacking him personally, but just engaging in meaningful discourse via a social media platform. And then it got to the point where, you know, he was still using words, calling pictures of black people doing a protest, calling them animals, but refused to see how that word animal is not, you know, symbolically, is truly dehumanizing someone. You're calling them animals.
Which is historically what we were referring to.
But the fact that you call a protester an animal, but you didn't say anything about the police who had his knee in the back of George Floyd's neck. You didn't call him an animal.
The men that chased down
Ahmaud Arbery. Didn't call them animals. But you have the nerve to look at a picture that you saw on the news of black people doing a protest, and there was some fire in the background, some rioting and looting, and you put your mouth on those black people in that one frame, that picture, and call them animals. But no word of animals who hunted down like a dog Ahmaud Arbery and killed him.
Police officers that showed up unarmed, killed Breonna in her home, asleep.
Plain clothes, no knock warrant, wrong person, EMT, no criminal background. You don't call them animals, but you see a picture of black people doing a protest, you call them animals. That's the hypocrisy I'm talking about. And so for this particular person, I didn't unfriend him, but I got to a point where, you know what, I said everything I had to say for now anyway. And, you know, I just ended my dialogue. But at the end of the day, unless he unfriends me, which is fine, whatever I post, you know, at some point in time, we'll cross paths. And my goal is to speak truth, live truth, with the goal of influencing as many people as I can.
You know, and so for our audience, and something that we continue to work out every day is, how do you continue to learn and to love your life through such pain?
Right.
Being able to like we said, don't be silent. You have to tell your story. That is part of self-care, getting it up, shedding light on the stuff that has happened to you personally, things that you may have seen, things that were traumatic, to start the healing process for yourself. Number 2, healthy dialogue. Coming to the table with people that don't look like you. Mm-hmm. They haven't walked in your shoes, and being able to have an empathetic ear,
right,
and actually listen versus seeking to debunk what somebody says, or to say, well, that wasn't me. That wasn't my parents. That's not the point of listening to somebody's story. Listen and seek to understand, then to be understood. You know, number 3, being able to admit and own your own prejudices and racism, so that you can ask God to come in and to heal that
Right, and do your work to do your work. Go talk to therapists. You have to do your work. You have to want to be healed. You have to want to do better. No one, including God, is going to make you do anything.
Number 4, I would say, look, if you believe that the Bible is God's word, understand that what we're walking through right now is biblical. Nations against nations. Can you break that down a little bit, baby?
Well, at the bottom line, I mean, at the end of the day, listen, we're living through it, so you're still going to be angry. We still have to fight injustices and do our part. But for sure, I mean, the scripture is clear. Nation will rise against nation. That word nation is, translated as ethnos, people groups. There'll be wars and rumors of wars. But at the end of the day, we have got to do our part. There's nothing new under the sun. This is not a new issue. This is rooted in racism and hate. This is nothing new. Okay? But we have to do our part to say this is not okay. This is not okay. And the more people open up their mouth and speak up for truth and justice, the more you're ushering in light. That only light has the power to drive out darkness.
Come on now.
So when you open up your mouth and you stand for justice, you speak for justice. As Dr. Martin Luther King said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. So when you open up your mouth and you stand up for truth, you get together and put corresponding actions to address injustices. You are a beacon of light, and the more light you put on the situation, the more darkness has to flee. The more hate, racism has to flee. So listen, we have the power in our hands and the power in our mouths. And it's up to us to come together and be beacons of light to drive this hate out, to drive these injustices out. And it does start with you. I don't care where you are, what city, state, or nation you live in. You have a role to play. Be a beacon of light, thereby helping to drive out this darkness that we face so that we can live in a better world.
Another thing I would say is address your fears.
Oh,
why
man,
why are you afraid of a black man?
And listen, man, I'm glad you hit on that fear thing. The reality of it is, why are you afraid of a black man? And even as a black man or as black people, are you afraid to go in certain areas or have discussions with certain people because you're more comfortable? And it's rooted in fear. We have to address our fears. That's the only way that we can move forward. Because a lot of this stuff that we're dealing with is rooted in fear and being silent and just going by status quo, and everything continually repeats.
And here's the thing. Fear literally arrests the body.
Mm-hmm.
Our bodies hold fear.
Yeah.
And so when you know that it's crucial that you address fear in your life, how it's operating, the gate, how did it get in? Mm-hmm. And then bring truth to it so that you can heal that part of you. Because
some people don't speak up because they're fearful. Well, what if this happens? What if that happens? Or they don't move because they're paralyzing fear. Listen, we all, as humans, we all deal with fear. The issue is being fearful is having fear is an emotion. But what we're talking about is paralyzing fear.
Right.
Well, you don't do what's right because you're afraid. And so I want to encourage us all. Listen, confront our fears, open up our mouths. Don't be silent. Speak up against injustices. Come together. Let's all be that beacon of light to drive out this darkness of racism, hate, and injustice. Hey, God bless, fam, baby. Tell them where they can check us out at.
You can check us out on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher, and YouTube.
Peace.
Love you all.
Shout to the city that raised me. Shout to the people that made me. I'm from the 80s. I don't think mumbling wavy. I grew up black on a Jay-Z. Maybe I'm crazy. I ain't been wondering lately. Feel like it's there for the taking. Feel like I'm good with the changes. Know who I am. And that's the most dangerous state.
Hey, Love Your Life fam. It's Crystal and Andre Holland.
What's up, everybody?
Hey, looking forward to hearing from you. So to find us, you can check us out on
Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Stitcher. We look forward to hearing from you all.